talk about industrial revolution that was happening in Europe and those countries and those continents, and how they needed labor to grow the industrial revolution, and hence came down to Africa.
I don't think they were leading labor. When they needed labor, led to slavery. Colonization was new markets.
Yeah,
new markets and where to get resources to fund the industrial revolution.
Exactly. So my point being that colonization should have continued in Africa.
Welcome back to SSRG and Your View. And today we wanted to talk about colonization. And there are too many things to talk about when we are talking about colonization. And colonization is not a thing of the past. Neo-colonization is still existing. The West is still dictating what happens in a lot of African countries, and they don't like it when Africans try to be independent and do their own thing. So, but today we want to specifically focus on how colonization is taught in schools in Africa and specifically in Nigeria. We are not saying Nigeria is the entire Africa, but we are going to be discussing this, and we hope that people from other African countries can share their own views on how colonization is being taught in schools. So I will start by asking you guys, how were you taught colonization in primary and secondary school?
I go first. Okay, guys, so thank you for having me back here. I've missed being here. Diving right in, I love what you said about how they would not allow us to do our things our own way. And that takes me back to how I was taught amalgamation in my secondary school. Like how the whites, Frederick Lugard precisely, amalgamated and gave us Nigeria, amalgamated regions that are staying on their own. And
it was the wife
doing their stuff, how they love to do their stuff. Like we're doing our thing, and he came with the wife. Is it the wife or the girlfriend?
Oh, the girlfriend.
He came and decided that, he felt it was better for him to do what he thought was right for the northern, the southern, and the eastern regions in Nigeria. People with different cultures, people with different ways of life. And he called this amalgamation and brought it together to make it easy for him to do what he wants to do. And I was taught in school that amalgamation in 1914 was something, for me, it felt like something very good that gave rise to what we call Nigeria now. But now I do not think, we all know what's going on. So
like I definitely think like the way we've been taught what's it called? Colonization.
Yeah.
You must pardon me because this is not my mother tongue. But,
yes.
But when you were talking, Fidel, it just made me recall my secondary school teacher. God bless him. And I hope he doesn't get to watch this video and think, he didn't do a good job. He did a good job. He taught us well, but I feel like maybe they dictated what he was supposed to teach us. So because he taught us about it's called the scramble for partitioning of Africa, which happened in 1844. So when he would teach us about that, he would talk about industrial revolution that was happening in Europe and those countries and those continents, and how they needed labor to grow the industrial revolution, and hence came down to Africa.
I don't think they were leading labor. When they needed labor, led to slavery. Colonization was new markets. New markets and where to get resources to fund the industrial revolution.
Exactly. So my point being that he did not make it clear to us that scramble for and partitioning for Africa was a bad thing. So we all felt that, these people actually did us a great thing to scramble for and decide that they want to come to Africa to come and colonize.
Yeah.
That was weird. Credit to him for telling us these things, but I feel like more should have been done.
Exactly. We study history, but not in a way that we think for ourselves. In a way that makes it look like
at some point
we should appreciate these people.
From schools.
They started buying exactly.
I'm just
buying it from school. Yeah.
I'm just grateful that the government teacher I had in secondary school was a strong critique of whatever we claim that colonization did.
Yes.
I remember that when I was in primary school, it was a picture of someone doing you a great favor, a huge favor. So we were made to believe in secondary school that without colonization, we would be
Somewhere.
probably dead by
We'll be
then.
worse off.
Yeah. So we saw
Uncivilized,
it,
how they call it.
we saw it as something we should be grateful for with all our lives. But when I got to
I mean,
senior
sorry
high
to cut
school,
you. I've even heard of people
Yeah.
talk about the fact that colonization should have continued in Africa. I mean,
no. People, let me bust your bubble. Earlier on today, in the afternoon, I saw someone's post on TikTok. There were two pictures, one of good road and another one of bad road. And the person wrote, "Look at what we have after colonization." So even today in 2025, people still wish that colonization, would have continued. And this is why neo-colonization is still living with us.
I mean,
today.
the term itself, it's bad. How did we talk about a term that's the meaning of colonize? Take
Yeah.
over somebody, like you don't give the person agency.
I
You
think
remove
first off-
identity from the person. How do
No,
we
you
make a
have to-
term like that
You
look
have to
right?
recognize that in the past, that term didn't have negative connotations.
right.
It didn't have negative connotations in the past, because when the Europeans used it to talk about colonization, they were presenting it first to their own people as them bringing civilization to these African countries, when civilization actually started in Egypt, of like Western civilization, not civilization in general. Western civilization started in Egypt, and when the Portuguese came to Nigeria, they saw cities that were in Benin and they were trading with them. So, but they had to create a narrative that first other people who are in Europe would buy, and then they would bring it to us and then introduce it to us. But
Exactly.
I don't want to
exactly. Just the way you talked about it, they will bring it to us to buy. That's what I was going to say about the secondary school teacher that taught me, because he was the first man that told us that the white man came with two things. On one hand, the white man had a Bible, and on the other hand, a sword. The essence of the Bible was to make you believe, to use religion to make you understand Christianity, to make you understand that you need to obey God and be blameless. You don't need to question anything. And then the essence of the sword was to kill you while you believe in God. That man, I will never forget that man, because he was the first person that started making us think that, okay, something wrong had happened to us. If not, I don't know what I would be thinking today, but it is what it is.
I'm going to jump into the next question, because I'm wondering how you think this teaching of how we were colonized, or the impact, still play out in our everyday life. And I say this because I remember a few years ago, somebody asked me to Google corporate hair, and I googled corporate hair. It was just white people's hair and all whatnot. And then the person said Google unprofessional hair. I googled unprofessional hair, and it's black people with dreads and all whatnot. And if you look at a lot of African countries, in schools, hairs like dreadlocks, afro, and are banned in schools.
Yeah.
And how did it come about? It was because during colonization, the British outlawed all this type of presentation. So the African way of presenting, including our markings on the body, piercings, we are banned by the British. But we have taken it over, and we had continued, propagating it.
I would say like the highest impact it had on us is removing that identity. Because the way they made everything look like superiority and inferiority, right? So they removed that identity from us. That the for example, you talked about the African hair. I remember a time that it was controversy because a pastor had dreads, and people were like, "Pastor, what do you guys mean? That is his hair. What do you guys mean?" Or this person is a Christian and they have
by the way, let me confess now, because I was a prefect. I was a prefect in my secondary school, and I was part of the group that was campaigning against carrying punk like pub and stuff like that.
But what did you know?
What do you know, really? Yeah.
You were trained to believe
all my
that
secondary
students
school
shouldn't present
classmates,
that way.
I'm sorry. To all
Yeah.
I'm canceling now.
As a woman, you see like people saying something to tone your skin, something brightening cream, lightening cream.
It's $1 billion industry in Africa.
The melanin that God blessed me with as an African is something that, because of that impact, you are trying to rub off. Something that they should be looking for, something that they are sunbathing for, frying themselves under.
And for me, the worst impact is that I am not even sure that as we speak, the impact is not even worse than it was. How? Because education, they propagated this thing, they like sowed the seed in education and it germinated. Because I remember clearly that all the time I was in junior secondary school, even in senior secondary school, we kept on reading everything about Western people. A lot of the novels, Ernest Hemingway, John Fletcher,
Yes.
all the people, we had to memorize all the poems. Now, when I grew up, I began to ask myself, why did we not read histories of our ancestors, like our forefathers?
Didn't we have that?
Yeah.
Didn't
We don't have them. We don't have them in our
oral stories
education
and all whatnot?
I'm writing
Every day,
West African exams.
we had to read everything was about white men. Why should I be in Nigeria and be reading everything about someone in Europe, but I'm not reading about my own
education, like in social work, we are still using a lot of theories and models that are Western.
Someone said
it's
something
very
somewhere.
troublesome.
I read it somewhere. Someone said something very interesting. He said, even till now, with people think when you invite a guest speaker to an educational event and you post somebody that is white, it becomes
Important.
glorious, or becomes people will now come. What does that mean?
What I was thinking while we're all talking, I was thinking about the whole schooner scam mantra. And I'm thinking it's possible that it's because of colonial education that people keep saying schooner scam. Because for me, I think that most of the curricula do not incorporate indigenous knowledge. They do not teach you to be creative enough. And so the idea is you go to school, finish school, you want to get a job. That's the parallel line most Nigerians want to follow. And that's not good enough. So that's what the colonial education has not given to us.
Jonathan,
education teaches you about your identity. You want to learn. Yeah.
You don't understand how this thing is happening. You are even going too far when you say our curricula doesn't include indigenous knowledge. That is even too deep for me. I mean, the best way you can think about it is that if you have any conversation in Nigeria, anywhere, if it's an organization, a hospital, an agency, anywhere that a white man works, that's where people want to go. Just think about it like this, because we believe this is superior. I say in Igbo language, that it is white people that work there. What the hell does this mean? So
Last
this is how you can think about it.
We have less than 2 minutes to wrap this up.
Okay.
What is the way forward?
The way forward, because I wrote something about this actually in the beginning of this year. The way forward is what we are just talking about. Teachers, especially if you are able to watch this video, understand something. Be that secondary school teacher that I will not forget about. This is one of the ways forward. Tell them young in primary and secondary school. Tell them our own history, not Frederick Lugard or whoever that we read all in the past. So teachers have a huge role to play. Teach them the harmful effect of colonization, not paint it like.
Let them read books like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Exactly.
Let that be a recommended book.
I think that's the number of people that died. That's another way we can the solution to this.
All the oppression, all the discrimination, all the maltreatment.
We have to own up to those things and say those were bad times.
Yeah.
We don't have to paint it like it was good. We have to come out and say, even the people who colonized us have to come up and say, oh, those were bad times.
Well, they recognized it. Because if you're in the West now and you talk about colonization, they recognize how horrible it is. But the problem is that we in Africa are not seeing the harm of colonization.
Exactly. The colonizers now, their own generation feel worse for us.
I've been they call that thing. Captor
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome, yeah.
But the thing is, like, it has put in a lot of internalized racism. We don't have a sense of pride anymore in who we are and our identity, like Fidel rightly mentioned, right? So that's changed. Rethinking of how we discuss this thing is quite.
I deeply appreciate content creators that are promoting Africa. There is this girl that answers question in the most sarcastic way. She does very good.
I know
because
her.
I mean, if you keep answering question like they say, oh, do you see
have
that what
houses
you live
in
in lions?
Africa?
Do you have money? Do you eat food? Do you do whatever nonsense question they ask? But I like how the girl is answering it in the way that you would think you understand that your question is very stupid.
We teleported.
And
Yes,
lastly, I want to add something. Lastly, this one is strictly for Africans who were born in the north. Maybe your parents gave birth to you in the US or Canada or wherever, and when you want to introduce yourself, first of all, I am originally, this is what they always say, I'm originally from the USA, but I am African. It doesn't make sense. Just
what is originally?
It doesn't make sense because there is no originality about your origin. Yes.
I don't understand where this conversation is coming from. But
I understand. I understand where it's coming from.
Because I feel like that would be a different conversation on its own. So
I also think lastly that people that have influence should act these things. Let's not stop saying it. One of the things like I love how all of you are carrying dreads. Ima, you should get your own dreads and get your own tattoo. I also think we should do that. I think
bullet don't hit you.
I have tattoo, by the way.
But it is still something that you want to do, because it's not like every of our ancestors had dreads. Yeah. But we should not say this is evil. So people that have influence should show it, because you have people looking up to you and they will know that this is good because this person is doing it. It is good because it is good. So thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Let's
click the like button.
Like, subscribe, share.